So Snoopy is getting tired already. We're walking in, that park that is covered almost like a tunnel of foliage. Yeah, very nice. It's city property. Um, so my curiosity, dug a little bit deeper when I was talking about, when we become transgender. And I had to look up, if they have like penis surgery, right? I mean, how can you be a transgender woman or a woman who's transgender to a man and not have a penis? Well, to my surprise, you can. They can surgically I guess invert the vagina of a woman and use that vagina as a penis, and I'm like, this is just an awesome time to be alive. For real, for real. Okay? And I had did my research where there were, say, Caucasian women who decided that they wanted to be a woman of color, but there was a lot of animosity about that. Basically stating that white women shouldn't become women of color, yet it's okay for black women, to bleach their skin and even remove their color. That just sort of it hit me in a bad way. I'm like, what is this one-way, one-sided situation? What is this going on here? And I feel like that needs, further investigation, because it's definitely going to be, topics of discussion going forward, along with the notion that, when you change genders and you change your role in our society, you know, and society, the family, and others, you know, have to accept these changes. And this is going on in our society regardless of whether or not we have the law that says you're either male or you're female. Okay, so if you go on a transgender journey, then you have to complete the transition. Okay. Okay. So on my algorithm, um, the uh, the homosexual aspect came up where you'll have men who are very, very strong compared to a woman, dangerous compared to a woman, right? Because, like I said, women usually prefer peace. Men, you know, they prefer to fight and be violent and destructive. Where this guy was in a relationship with another man, and you know, he was getting sick, and he was going to try to, you know, make life changes. And part of his life change was to lose weight and to lose the weight of that man that he had been with. And that man wasn't taking it very well at all. Okay? So he ended up, you know, dismembering his partner, putting them in a bag, in a couple of bags, exhausting, you know, his funds while, you know, he was missing. And then basically, you know, when he got caught, he changed his story from not knowing where this guy was. It said he probably, you know, went camping, to this guy had pulled a knife out, and therefore he felt like, you know, he had to defend himself, right? And yeah, so you know, he could have been charged with so many charges, but he did end up pleading guilty to second-degree murder and the hiding of evidence, something like that. Um, so even if men get estrogen, they're still going to have, uh, subcurrents of their masculine traits, right? And I feel that's the same thing that would happen for, say, a woman, who decides that, she's going to take, testosterone and steroids. That's just going to, dominate over her original makeup of being a woman, and that her estrogen would still be, a subcurrent of the dominant current. But, you can still be, whatever you like, if you have the funding to do so. And I think that's amazing. Amazing. Now, how they got to this level of technology, I'm sure it had a lot to do with, testing that has been going on, unbeknownst to society at large. Okay? I've been technically out of the workplace for 5 months now. And, doing a little Ubering here and there. I kind of liked it, right? I'm not sure if I'll try to do, a few little bit of Ubering here and there. Of course, it was totally gratifying, to get like a $30 tip, yeah, it really was. The average person, always, seem to tip more after the fact, which I thought was great. I mean, I didn't really do that many deliveries. Like I said, I usually did maybe 2 to 4 a day. It wasn't really enough to, make a huge difference, because like I said, This electrical car is like riding around in a golf cart. And you're not going to go very far, very fast, and the battery's going to drain pretty quick. And that's probably where they got the idea from, like, hey, probably went to some island where people were riding around in a golf cart, and they said, why not make a car out of a golf cart? And they did it. And they did it. Right? And then the part of me is like, well, maybe I could trade this car in and get me another vehicle. Right? But I'm telling you, I love the fact that, I don't have to go to the gas station. I love the fact even more of not having to do oil changes. I just don't like the fact that, my battery runs down so fast. And it takes so long to recharge. So that's the one thing that's making me feel like, I need to, go to work at a business rather than travel, but to try to do the Ubering and DoorDash thing, maybe just enough to, to buy something extra, it's really not viable, because as it stood, I was pretty much making something like $10 an hour on an average, $10 an hour. When I would, try to get out there, it was getting to be like $10 an hour. Or $20 a whole shift on 4 hours. Yeah. If I had to pay gas, then yeah, that would have been a no. So, I don't know. Maybe tomorrow I'll submit an application to a local fast food restaurant, and just to see what happens. Would I like to work full time? Yes. I mean, I would even work full time remotely, and only make, like $3,000 a month. I would do that. Right? But I just don't think it's worth it to only get, say, $3,000 a month, you know, and then have to travel and, you know, the 8 hours, you know, basically turned into 10 or 11 hours with traffic and lunch, and, you know, and that's just increasing, you know, your expenses because, you know, the maintenance of traveling to the job site, the wear and tear on your car, the, you know, the traffic, you know. I don't know if you've seen in some of my other videos the impatience, the road rage, the numerous times, almost every single time I got out of the house and into my car, you know, I had to avoid an accident. And that's real. That's a very real thing. And there's just really a lot of, you know, road rage and reckless drivers out here. That lady is running out here and it's 91 degrees. So I have not, you know, reviewed this big, beautiful bill. Now that it's passed with all of its amendments, as I'm sure, you know, it's definitely different than the initial bill. It hasn't come on my feed yet where somebody is, you know, breaking it down, you know, bit by bit and section by section. A lot of people are saying that it's probably close to what was stated in the 2025 GOP objective that they had. But there's another part of me that is saying, okay, if this is how it's going to be, you know, maybe I should just go ahead and file bankruptcy. You know, if I file bankruptcy, then I won't be pressed with, you know, those bills. Typically, I'll be able to keep my home and you know, I just, you know, won't have access, you know, to credit typically. However, there's probably a lot of people who has filed bankruptcy and already and are on, you know, the rebound to reestablishing themselves and their credit worthiness. Even though the bankruptcy stays on your credit for 10 years, you can still establish a fair credit status by reestablishing yourself, because it's based off of a point system. And that's something that, I kind of looked into, but they have implemented some steps, making it difficult for you just to file a bankruptcy. They want you to go through credit counseling situations before you can even qualify to submit a bankruptcy. Even with my bills taken away, sustaining myself is going to be difficult. Now, if they increase, Social Security to reflect, the cost of living adjustments appropriately, instead of just saying, oh, well, we're going to give them an extra $100, or we're going to give them a stimulus of $1,000. That helps a little bit, right? But it's not going to solve the problem when the average one bedroom out there is $1,500. And people will say, you can get it for less. But what are you getting for less? You're getting a substandard living situation that, you're going to wish you never got into, and you would prefer to live in a vehicle than live in a rat or roach infested place where, you're going to be, it would almost be like living in a battleground, because, there will be so much, hostile and illegal activities going on all around you. And, the privacy will be reduced tremendously, once you become a renter. And that's why some people will prefer, the privacy of a tin can on wheels and having to move every day than to be stationary and feel like you're now a stationary target. Because the poor are always targeted. The poor are targeted by the people who have more money than them, and they are also targeted by people who have less than they have. Period. Ooh, it's chilly in this car. So from this? Right? How quickly will people actually benefit from this? It's really not about, ranting and blaming and at this point, it's just really about, figuring out, resolutions. Ultimately, I could, cash out my house and, and go to live in a country of, lower standards, because that's pretty much what you're paying for. The cost of living is lower and the standards are lower, right? But, I don't want to do that because I have my dog. I've watched videos of people, spending thousands of dollars, just to be able to get their dog to be able, or their animal, to be able to travel with them. And whether my dog, expires, or I have to give up my dog, I will definitely be grieving the loss of my dog, who has been my companion and spiritual animal for damn near 2 decades. So, makes me think about that song, let me tell you about my best friend. It was a show, actually. It's just way too complicated. And even if I can manage, to pay her way and my way and go to another country, I might be able to handle the shock of change. But I don't think in her old age that she can. Like I said, our walks have, been reduced to just a few hundred feet. And sense of smell, her hearing, her eyesight, all of that is on the decline. Yeah. I would love for her to have a calm and beautiful sunset of her life, you know. So she's my anchor. I've seen several homes up for sale. I've seen some vacant homes. So, yeah, typically in the summertime, you know, there is a huge transition, you know, as people, you know, try to position themselves in a situation before the next school season. You know, this area where I live, you know, there's schools in close proximity. Great place for the children, you know. Great place for adults who mind their business and they're not trying to, you know, be in, you know, these cliques. You know, not to mention, this house was given to me by God. I'm telling you, God answered my prayers when I moved into this house, period.